Some betrayals don't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. Some slip into your life wearing polished shoes, smiling politely, and calling themselves family. On the night he held a pair of $2.50 socks in his trembling hands, while his daughter gifted a $16,000 Rolex to another man, Tom Bradley felt something ancient break inside him. Not anger, not jealousy, but the slow, devastating realization that he had raised a daughter who no longer saw him and married into a family that never intended to. Yet this story is not about defeat. It's about a quiet man who learned to fight the kind of war waged behind crystal chandeliers and perfect smiles. A war where love becomes leverage, where loyalty is currency, where silence is the sharpest blade of all. And on that Father's Day, Tom finally understood. He had been invited to dinner not as a father, but as a wallet. If you've ever felt the burn of being underestimated, if you've ever been treated as disposable by the people you sacrificed everything for, stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a story of betrayal. It's the story of a man who decided to teach his final, unforgettable lesson. He had spent most of his life inside classrooms that smelled faintly of chalk dust and aging textbooks. 35 years teaching American history at Westside High, watching generations of students grow taller, louder, and more certain of the world than he had ever been. Tom Bradley was never a man of prestige or power. He was a man who believed that stability was a quiet sort of love. And for decades, that was enough. It had to be. Because from the moment Sarah was born, a miracle child after years of fear and false hopes, his world narrowed into a single purpose: give her the life she deserved, even if it meant starving himself of the one he might have wanted. Their first home was nothing special to anyone but them. A small, aging house with soft carpets and a porch too small for chairs but perfect for dreams. He remembered how Linda would circle homes in the Sunday paper, whispering, "Someday we'll have something like that," as if speaking the dream aloud made it a little less distant. They lived paycheck to paycheck, but they lived fully, stretching each dollar like an act of faith. Vacations were road trips with packed sandwiches. Celebrations were take-out dinners that felt like feasts because they were rare. Love became the currency that made everything feel richer than it was. Linda worked as a dental hygienist until Sarah arrived, and after that, the house was filled with the chaos of toys, laughter, and the soft hum of a family building itself from hope. Sarah was spoiled, yes, but spoiled with presents, not possessions. Every award ceremony, every recital, every scraped knee, Tom was there. Some nights, he graded papers on the couch while Sarah curled beside him with her dolls, rearranging them by hair color like miniature royalty. He would look at her and think, if the world tries to take anything from her, it'll have to go through me first. Life wasn't easy, but it was whole. And when Sarah turned 8, they finally bought their dream house. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a patch of grass Linda called a garden waiting for courage. Tom took extra jobs to keep the mortgage afloat, tutoring after school, working summers as a painter, holiday shifts at Home Depot. Each sacrifice was small compared to the way Sarah lit up when she talked about her future. She was their dream in human form. But dreams grow fragile when illness enters a home. Tom remembered the day Linda's diagnosis arrived. Breast cancer, stage 2. He remembered how the doctor's voice softened, how the walls seemed to move closer, how he held Linda's hand and told her they would fight as a team. And they did. For 3 long years. Through surgeries, chemo, nights spent in hospitals with fluorescent lights whispering exhaustion into their bones. He worked every extra hour he could find, never telling Linda how the bills terrified him. She needed hope, not numbers. He sold what he could. He refinanced the house. Twice. He canceled everything except the essentials and his promises. Sarah, then in college, offered to drop out. He refused. Linda refused harder. "Our girl finishes what she started," she insisted, even on days she couldn't lift her own spoon. By the end, Linda was a shadow of the woman she'd been, but still somehow radiant in her stubbornness. She died on a warm March afternoon, azaleas blooming outside the window like a cruel celebration. And as Tom held her hand for the last time, her voice, faint and fragile, delivered a final directive: take care of our girl. Don't let her settle. Grief rearranged Tom's life overnight. He sold the house to pay the avalanche of medical bills, moved into a modest rental furnished with second-hand pieces that didn't match but held him up anyway. Retirement loomed ahead, not as rest, but as something heavier, an emptiness he needed to fill with purpose. Sarah visited often at first, her eyes always carrying a flicker of sadness that didn't quite fade. But soon her career consumed her. New job, new colleagues, a new rhythm. He told himself it was natural. Children drift. It didn't mean they stopped loving you. And then she met Preston. Tom still remembered the first dinner. How Preston's watch was worth more than Tom's car. How he spoke in glossy phrases like legacy and generational wealth. How Sarah glowed as if she had finally stepped into a world bright enough for her ambitions. Tom felt small in his own living room that night, wearing a shirt ironed 3 times to hide its age. But Sarah was happy, and happiness mattered more than discomfort. 2 weeks later, Charles Whitman arrived. The patriarch, the architect of the family empire, a man who carried himself like Charleston owed him tribute. He scanned Tom's home the way one might examine a donation drop-off. Modest, he said, a word dipped in condescension. Tom smiled anyway. For Sarah. The wedding planning began almost immediately, but it was planning in name only. Charles orchestrated everything, from the venue to the flowers to the dress Sarah once loved, until he declared it too plain. Tom watched his daughter shrink and shift, molding herself to Whitman expectations until her edges dulled. When the bill arrived, $48,000, Tom emptied what little remained of his life savings. Linda had made him promise, and promises were sacred. He told himself it was worth it. Sarah looked beautiful. Preston looked proud. Charles looked satisfied. And Tom? He sat in the 3rd row, because the front was reserved for immediate Whitman blood. Still, he told himself it didn't matter. As long as Sarah smiled, he could carry anything. But as the years unfolded, Sarah visited less, spoke softer, thought less like the girl he raised and more like the people who now dictated her life. His sacrifices faded into the wallpaper of her new world, one built on marble floors, country club politics, and a currency he couldn't compete with. The cracks had been forming for a long time. Father's Day would simply make them impossible to ignore. The Whitmans live in a world where money didn't just open doors. It built the doors, polished the hinges, and decided who was worthy enough to walk through. The first time Tom stepped into their estate on South Battery, he felt the quiet chill that comes from standing in a place designed to remind visitors of their own smallness. The marble floors gleamed like ice. Oil portraits of dead men stared down with the smugness of old wealth. Even the air seemed trained to behave, filtered through vents that didn't dare rattle. Sarah fit into that world too easily. Maybe because she wanted to. Maybe because Charles made sure she did. At first, Tom convinced himself it was just culture shock. Sarah had entered a family with roots tangled deep in Charleston's oldest soil. She wanted to belong. Any daughter would. But as months turned into years, the transformation became harder to ignore. Her clothes changed. Her voice softened into the same careful politeness the Whitmans used. Her smile lingered only when Preston looked approving. And when she brought Tom to their home, she introduced him not as dad, but as my father, the educator, as though his profession explained everything she didn't want to say out loud. The slow erosion of her identity was subtle, almost elegant in its cruelty. That was a Whitman way: reshape, refine, correct. They didn't need to forbid her from honoring her past. They just praised her more whenever she stepped further from it. By the time Father's Day arrived, Tom had become an accessory in Sarah's new life. Not a partner, not a parent. Something placed at the far end of a long dining table, too distant to disturb the conversation. She picked him up that afternoon in a BMW he hadn't known she drove. "You look sharp, Dad," she said, smiling in a way that felt practiced. He'd tried. Khakis ironed twice. Polo shirt starched. Deodorant he rarely used because he wanted to smell fresh, whatever that meant in Whitman society. But the moment he stepped into the mansion's foyer, he knew he had shown up underdressed, underestimated, unnecessary. The dining room was a cathedral of excess, crystal chandelier, mahogany table big enough for a banquet, wine bottles worth more than his monthly pension. Charles sat at the head like a king at court, Preston on his right, checking stock prices as though the world depended on his thumbs. Sarah placed Tom at the far left end, where the chandelier barely reached. "Thomas," Charles greeted without standing. "Good to see you. Enjoying retirement." "Staying active," Tom answered. "Teaching is honorable work. Not profitable, Naturally, but honorable. Preston chuckled without lifting his eyes from his phone. Dinner unfolded like performance. Fine wine, beef tenderloin, conversations about acquisitions and country club disputes. Tom tried to contribute, but his words drowned under the tide of Whitman confidence. He was invisible, except when being politely acknowledged like a guest speaker who'd overstayed his welcome. Then came the moment. Charles tapped his glass. Sarah has prepared some wonderful surprises. Sarah stood, glowing, and reached for an elegant wooden box. Tom recognized the logo immediately, Rolex. She handed it to Charles with trembling excitement. For you, Dad Charles, for being an incredible example of success and leadership. Charles lifted the lid slowly, theatrically. Inside lay a Rolex Submariner, the kind men built empires wearing. The room buzzed with admiration, as though Sarah had delivered a crown to a king. 16,500, Sarah added proudly. Tom forced a smile. That amount was months of his pension, years of his sacrifices. But he swallowed the bitterness because fathers are supposed to be gracious. And now for your father, Charles announced, gesturing toward Tom like a host revealing a consolation prize. Sarah reached beneath her chair and pulled out a white plastic Dollar Tree bag. The kind that crinkles too loudly. The kind used for impulse buys at checkout counters. Sorry, Dad, she said softly. Budget's tight this month. Inside were socks. Black, generic, still held together by a plastic tag. $2.50. The room stilled. Sarah pressed on, her voice thin. You always complain about holes in your socks, so I thought. Tom lifted the package, the price tag staring back like an accusation. He nodded gently. Thank you, sweetheart. Very thoughtful. But something inside him, the part that had absorbed years of sacrifice without complaint, splintered. Charles admired his Rolex beneath the chandelier's glow. Preston recorded him on his phone. Sarah basked in their approval as though this was a father she needed to impress. Tom sat with a Dollar Tree bag in front of him like an unwanted guest clutching a party favor. The humiliation wasn't the socks. It was what the socks revealed. His daughter had learned to measure worth through the Whitman lens. And in that lens, he was small. An afterthought. A man to be thanked quietly and seated far from the real conversation. He excused himself before dessert. Sarah walked him out. Thanks for understanding. Dad, money's really tight right now. Tight, Tom repeated softly, picturing the Rolex. She hugged him quickly, distracted. He drove home with those socks on the seat beside him, that cheap plastic crinkling every time he braked. The cymbal sat heavy, louder than any word spoken at that table. At 9:45 p.m., she called again. Dad, can I ask something big? Her voice was sweet, soft, the little girl he remembered suddenly resurfacing. He braced himself. Of course. There's this investment opportunity. Charles says it's a once-in-a-lifetime expansion. Luxury properties, really promising. They want to bring me in as a partner. I just need to contribute capital. How much? $620,000. The number sucker punched him. That was everything he had saved after Linda's medical bills, everything he had rebuilt after losing the house, everything he needed to survive the rest of his life. That's a lot, sweetheart. It's not a gift, she insisted. An investment. Charles showed me projections. They say returns in 18 months. This could change everything for me. For me, she said. Not for us. She didn't ask how he was living. She didn't ask if he could afford it. She only knew that Charles wanted the money. And because Charles wanted it, she believed she needed it. After she hung up, Tom sat in that dim apartment with a sock still on his table. And for the first time in years, he didn't think about what Linda had asked him to promise. He thought about what Linda would tell him now. Don't let her settle. Don't let them use her. Don't let them rewrite who she is. The socks, the Rolex, the request for $620,000. This wasn't family. This was consumption of Sarah's loyalty, of Tom's dignity, of every boundary he had left. And for the first time in a long while, something in Tom didn't break. It hardened. The Whitmans had mistaken his kindness for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. Sleep didn't come that night. Tom sat at his kitchen table long after midnight, the Dollar Tree socks still lying where he placed them, as if they were keeping watch over the wreckage of his thoughts. He kept turning the package over in his hands, the plastic tag pressing into his thumb, grounding him in a reality he'd been avoiding for years. $620,000. A number designed not to ask, it was designed to take. He thought of Linda, thought of all the nights she lay in a hospital bed whispering promises they both knew were getting harder to keep. Take care of our girl. But what did that mean now? Protect Sarah from the world, or protect her from the people she believed were her world. Around 3 in the morning, something shifted. Maybe the quiet gave him clarity. Maybe the humiliation from that dining room still burned too hot to let him rest. Maybe the past 35 years of teaching had prepared him for this moment in ways he didn't realize. He began pulling out boxes, old financial papers, bank statements, medical bills, even Sarah's childhood photos. Not because he needed them, but because he needed to remember who he had been before the Whitmans tried to redefine him. By sunrise, he had a plan. Not a complete one, but the beginning of a thread he intended to pull until the Whitman world unraveled. The first step was information. Knowledge had always been his weapon. And unlike the Whitmans, who wielded money like a blade, Tom wielded truth. He called his credit union as soon as it opened. Asset protection strategies, the representative repeated. May I ask the reason? I'm being pressured, Tom said quietly, into a large investment. I want to understand my options in case things go sideways. The man on the phone hesitated, then softened his voice. Let's get you some appointments. Next came legal aid. I need advice on potential family financial exploitation, Tom said. Are you being threatened? The intake coordinator asked. No, manipulated. The word tasted bitter. He wondered if Sarah would agree. Within 2 hours, he had consultations scheduled with a financial planner and an attorney specializing in elder financial protection. It wasn't about age, it was about vulnerability. The Whitmans assumed he would fold because he'd always folded for Sarah. They mistook devotion for blindness. And that mistake would cost them. By noon, Tom was deep in public records. He searched Whitman Enterprises. Then he searched the Whitmans themselves. What he found wasn't criminal. People with wealth don't usually leave footprints that obvious. But it was revealing. Failed hospitality projects, families who lost their investments, quiet settlements, legal loopholes. Patterns emerged. Ones he suspected the Whitmans never expected anyone outside their circle to notice. Then he checked Sarah's social media. The pictures told a story he had been too gentle to read before. Sarah in designer suits at business dinners. Sarah at country club galas. Sarah on research trips through Europe. Sarah beaming in photos surrounded by Whitmans, each post captioned with words like opportunity, legacy, family. But the comments cut the deepest. Sarah fits right in. Perfect addition to the organization. She's learning fast. Learning what? How to let herself be reshaped. How to follow instructions without recognizing she was being led. And then the caption she wrote recently, one that landed like a blow to his chest. Grateful for my Whitman family's guidance and opportunities. Sometimes dreams require new directions. Whitman family. Not our family. Not even my blended family. Her Whitman family. Tom took screenshots of everything. By Friday afternoon, he sat across from attorney Elizabeth Morrison, a woman with sharp eyes, steady posture, and a voice that carried the calm authority of someone used to confronting predators disguised as loved ones. Tell me your situation, she said. Tom did. Slowly, carefully, from the wedding to the gift disparity to the investment pressure. He told her about the $48,000 wedding he'd paid for, the humiliating Father's Day, the late-night phone call asking for nearly everything he had left. When he finished, Elizabeth folded her hands and leaned back. Mr. Bradley, what you're describing is classic financial isolation. Tom blinked. You think Sarah is manipulating me? No, she said firmly. I think Sarah is being manipulated, and you are the secondary target. The words hit him hard. He had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed felt like cold wind hitting an old wound. What can I do? He asked. Elizabeth's voice dropped to something almost surgical. We give them exactly what they want, but not the way they want it. She explained the plan. Tom wouldn't refuse the investment. He would fulfill it through a legal structure they couldn't exploit. A foundation created in Linda's name. The Linda C. Bradley Educational Foundation. Funded with $160,000 from his savings. Strictly regulated. Protected by law. Accessible only for educational purposes. Transparent. Auditable. Impossible for the Whitmans to siphon without leaving fingerprints. If they're legitimate, Elizabeth said, they'll welcome the structure. And if they're not, they will expose their intentions immediately. Sarah would see. She would have to, because contrast reveals truth. And the Whitmans thrived in shadows. Tom felt something he hadn't felt since Linda died. Confidence. A spine strengthening. A teacher ready to give a lesson. On Monday, he called Sarah. Sweetheart, I've decided. I'm ready to move forward with the investment. Her gasp broke into a delighted exhale. Dad, this means a world to us. Us. She still thought she was part of their family. I'll need time to liquidate assets, he said, and complete the legal restructuring. Should I have Preston prepare the contracts? She asked. No. My attorney will handle it. A pause. Brief, but telling. Oh, okay. I'll let Charles know. Tom could hear the smile in her voice. He wondered if she could hear the sorrow in his. Over the next few days, the foundation was born. Linda's name etched into a cause she would have loved. Funding education for children from working-class families. Children like Sarah had once been, before money became a language she needed to speak to feel worthy. By Thursday, his financial profile had transformed. On paper, he owned almost nothing. In reality, he controlled a protected entity worth nearly $200,000. By Friday, the Whitmans smelled complication. When Sarah called, her voice carried a crack Tom hadn't heard before. Dad, Preston says foundations make things complicated. Maybe we should just keep this simple. Simple, he repeated, meaning no oversight. It's just time sensitive, Charles says. How time sensitive? Monday. Convenient, predictable, desperate. Sarah, he said softly, why do you want me to undo your mother's foundation? A long silence. I don't know. She did know. She just couldn't say it. Not yet. She didn't call again that night. Charles did. His voice was clipped, polished, stripped of its courteous veneer. Tom, I'll be direct. This deal requires liquid capital. The foundation complicates the process. So dissolve it. Tom asked. Yes. Be practical. Practical, Tom repeated, like valuing a man at $2.50. The silence on the line was thick and immediate, and in that silence, Tom understood exactly how much he had just revealed. Charles spoke again, voice icy. You are either supporting Sarah's future or limiting it. No, Tom replied quietly. I'm protecting Sarah's future from people who never intended to protect her. He hung up before Charles could respond. By Monday, the Whitmans demanded a meeting, a tribunal disguised as a family conversation. Tom arrived early. They thought they were about to control him. They thought they were about to pressure him. They thought they were about to secure his money. They didn't know the educator had come prepared to teach his most important lesson yet. The Whitman estate loomed like a courthouse that morning, silent, polished, ready to judge. Tom parked his modest car beside a line of gleaming machines engineered for men who wanted to be seen. He walked up the stone steps with steady breath, the Charleston heat pressing against his back, but something inside him felt cold, clear, and unmovable. Sarah met him at the door, eyes swollen, expression tight. Dad, thank you for coming. I think we can work everything out. He gave her a soft nod, though he doubted any working out was what the Whitmans had in mind. The study had been arranged with unsettling precision. Charles behind a mahogany desk, framed by books he'd never read. Preston to his right, legal documents lined like weapons. 2 chairs facing them, a tribunal formation. One for Sarah, one for him. They hadn't invited him for discussion. They had summoned him for compliance. Charles offered a thin smile. Thomas, appreciate you joining us. Preston tells me there's confusion regarding the investment. No confusion on my end, Tom replied calmly. The foundation is structured and ready to participate properly. Charles lifted a document with the weariness of a man forced to deal with incompetence. Our legal team reviewed your foundation. Unfortunately, foundations can't participate in private family partnerships. Conflict of interest, federal restrictions, complicated matters. Tom raised an eyebrow. Which attorneys provided this analysis? Preston chimed in before Charles could answer. Our family legal counsel. Very experienced. We trust them. I see, Tom said, voice smooth. Well, I'd love to share their written opinion with my attorney. A flicker of panic passed through Preston's eyes. That won't be necessary, he snapped. We just need simplicity. Direct investment. Clean transfer. Clean, meaning untraceable, unprotected, unregulated. Tom let the silence stretch, giving them room to reveal themselves. Sarah shifted in her seat. Her hands twisted together, knuckles pale. She looked like a child waiting to be scolded by principals, not family. Tom turned to her gently. Sweetheart, what do you think about dissolving your mother's foundation? Her head snapped up, shocked. Dad, nobody is asking you to. That is exactly what they are asking, he said softly. Charles exhaled with theatrical patience. Thomas, your emotional attachment is understandable. Truly, but sentiment must sometimes bow to practicality. Sentiment. Tom repeated. Honoring Linda's legacy is sentiment, and the alternative is what? Dissolving her memory for a business deal you refuse to explain. Charles' eyes hardened. We want Sarah to be part of something meaningful. Something larger than her upbringing. There. It slipped out. Ugly truth. Polished with elitism. Tom leaned forward. Larger than her upbringing. Charles? Larger than the family that raised her? Larger than the sacrifices that paid for that wedding you orchestrated? Preston's voice snapped across the room like a rope pulled too tight. Enough. This emotional grandstanding is ridiculous. Tom looked him dead in the eye. You're right. Let's deal in facts. He reached into his bag and pulled out the documents he compiled. Public records, BBB complaints, newspaper articles. He placed them gently on the desk in front of Charles. These are 4 families who invested with Whitman Enterprises. All lost money. All projects failed. All settlements were quiet, but documented. You claim this is a gold mine? Funny how it seems to only enrich the people who never risk their own funds. Preston lunged forward. Where did you get this? Public records, Tom replied. And educators know how to research. Charles' jaw tightened. You're misinterpreting complex financial situations. No, Tom said quietly. I'm recognizing patterns. Sarah looked between them, fear rising in her eyes. Is this true? She whispered to Preston. Preston didn't answer. Tom continued, voice steady. And let's not forget the Father's Day gifts. $16,000 for you, Charles. $2.50 for me. Thomas, Charles began. That, Tom said sharply, is respect quantified. Sarah flinched. Dad, I explained, our budget. Whose budget, sweetheart? Tom asked gently. Yours or theirs? Sarah froze. He reached into his folder again and pulled out the screenshots he'd saved from her social media. I also saw this, he said, handing her the phone. My Whitman family. Not our family. Not your own father. The Whitmans. Charles tried to interrupt. Thomas, media language hardly. You're right, Tom said, cutting him off. Let's talk about something more concrete. He pulled up the email thread from their investors. Multiple failed projects. Multiple victims. And now you want Sarah to join that list. Charles stood abruptly, rage tightening his posture. This is slander. This is truth, Tom replied. And I'm done pretending your manipulation is mentorship. Preston slammed his palm on the desk. You're going to ruin Sarah's future. Tom turned toward his daughter, his voice soft, pained. Sweetheart, may I ask you something? Sarah looked up, tears shaking in her lashes. Yes. What do you actually know about hospitality development? Not what they've told you. What do you know? I'm learning. You're learning their version, Tom whispered. Not the truth. Silence fell heavy, suffocating. Charles leaned forward, voice dropping to a venomous calm. Thomas, are you supporting Sarah or standing in the way of her potential? Tom inhaled slowly. There it was. The threat beneath the grooming. Acceptance or exile. He looked at Sarah. My entire life has been supporting your potential. But this. He gestured at Charles, at Preston, at the documents, at the manufactured pressure. This is not your future. This is their design. He stood. The room seemed to shift around him, as if the architecture itself realized the script was no longer in Whitman control. Here's what you didn't expect, he said softly. I taught for 35 years. I know manipulation when I see it. I know pressure tactics. I know the difference between guidance and control. And I know when someone is using a person I love. Preston sneered. You think you're some kind of hero. No, Tom replied. Just a father who won't let his daughter be devoured. He gathered his papers, slid them into his bag, and walked toward the door. Dad, Sarah whispered. He paused, turning back only slightly. When you're ready to see clearly, he said softly, you know where to find me. Then he faced Charles one last time. The foundation stands. Linda's memory stays intact. And my money stays with my integrity, something you can't buy with any Rolex. He left them in a perfect study, surrounded by perfect silence, built on a perfect facade. The tribunal had failed, but the war wasn't over. The Whitmans weren't done, and neither was he. The Whitman estate faded behind him, swallowed by the manicured oaks and iron gates, but the tension from that room clung to Tom long after he'd driven away. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel relieved. He felt emptied, like he'd poured every ounce of truth he had into a cage lined with velvet and gold, knowing the people inside would never appreciate it wait. For days passed. No calls, no texts, no sign of Sarah. He tried to convince himself she needed time to think, that the seeds he planted weren't falling on barren soil. But each silent hour twisted deeper into his chest, reminding him how far she drifted under the Whitman's influence. On Thursday, just as Tom was reheating leftover soup, his phone rang. Mr. Bradley. It was Elizabeth Morrison, her voice cool and crisp. Yes. The Whitman family attorneys reached out this morning. Tom steadied himself. What do they want? To explore legal options for compelling the dissolution of the Linda C. Bradley Foundation. He laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so grotesque it bordered on absurd. Can they do that? Absolutely not, Elizabeth said. But their attempt confirms everything we suspected. They don't want partnership. They want unrestricted access to your money. Tom exhaled slowly. So what happens now? Now, she said, we wait. Manipulators lose leverage when their target stops cooperating. They'll escalate, but in their escalation, they'll expose themselves. Tom thanked her and hung up. She was right. Pressure tactics only work on the isolated. He wasn't isolated anymore. He was prepared. That evening, after cleaning up the dinner he barely touched, a soft knock echoed through his apartment. He opened the door to find Sarah standing there, makeup smudged, hair limp, eyes swollen from crying. She looked nothing like the polished woman the Whitmans curated. She looked like his daughter. Dad, she whispered, can I come in? He stepped aside. Always. She sank onto his second-hand couch, the same couch she'd avoided sitting on during previous visits. Now she folded into it as though it was the only place holding her together. She twisted her wedding ring, an old childhood nervous habit. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to tell me the truth. Tom nodded. Of course. Do you think Preston's family is using me? The question landed like a stone between them. She wasn't asking blindly. She was asking because something inside her had already begun to crack. What do you think? Tom asked gently. She swallowed hard. I don't know who they are anymore, or who I became around them. Tom leaned closer. Tell me what happened. She took a shaky breath. After our meeting, she began, her voice trembling, Charles called me. He was furious you wouldn't dissolve the foundation. He said if you didn't cooperate, maybe it was time I started thinking about whether I wanted a future with my father or with my husband. Tom closed his eyes. There it was, the ultimatum hiding beneath polite conversations. A fork in the road designed to sever a daughter from her roots. And what did you say? He asked softly. I told him I needed time to think. Her voice dropped. He said time is a luxury we can't afford. Tom's jaw tightened. Sarah continued. Later, I asked Preston to show me the actual business plan, the real documents, assessments, financial projections. He said, family members don't need that kind of detail. That trust is what holds a family together. That asking for documents made me seem disloyal. And how did that make you feel? Tom asked. Confused, she whispered. Ashamed, like I was a problem for asking basic questions. Tom reached out and took her hand. You were not the problem. You were waking up. Sarah let out a tiny, broken laugh that turned into a sob. So, I went to the library, she said, wiping her eyes. I used their computers. I looked up Whitman Enterprises myself. Tom's heart tightened. What did you find? Exactly what you found, she whispered. Failed investments, lawsuits, families who trusted them and lost everything. Manipulation buried under paperwork. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I've been so stupid. No, Tom said firmly. You've been manipulated. That's different. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to steady herself. And then, she said, voice cracking again, I saw something on Preston's laptop. Emails between him and Charles. Tom felt his stomach drop. What kind of emails? She handed him her phone. Screenshots glowed on the screen. Charles to Preston 8 months after the wedding. Phase 1 complete. Sarah successfully distanced from father influences. Ready for Phase 2, financial isolation. Preston to Charles, dated last month. Bradley asset assessment complete. Approximately $185,000 available. Recommend time pressure tactic for maximum psychological effect. Charles to Preston, last week. Father's Day gift disparity effective. Bradley now isolated from decision-making influence. Execute investment request immediately. Tom stared at the words, his blood running cold. This wasn't accidental manipulation. This was strategy. An orchestrated operation. A 2-year campaign to break Sarah away from him and secure access to his savings. He handed the phone back slowly. Sweetheart, he said quietly, I'm so sorry. For what? She asked through tears. For not protecting you sooner. For not recognizing how deeply they were twisting things. For ever letting you feel like your worth was measured by them. She fell into him then, sobbing, shaking, small again, like the child he used to carry when she scraped her knees on the sidewalk. Dad, she cried against his chest. I'm so sorry about Father's Day. I didn't even realize what they were doing to me. What I was doing to you. Tom closed his eyes, holding her tighter. You don't need to apologize. You were surviving their system. No, she insisted. I hurt you. I humiliated you. You were being conditioned, he said softly. They made you believe their approval was worth more than mine. They made you think your past was something to hide. But, sweetheart, your mother would never have let them near you if she was still alive. Sarah trembled. I miss her. Me too, Tom whispered. Every day. They sat like that for a long time. Father and daughter, holding onto each other as the walls around Sarah's old illusions crumbled. Eventually, she pulled back. I can't go back there, she said quietly. Not tonight. You don't have to, Tom said immediately. Stay here, as long as you need. She nodded weakly. And Dad, she added, voice cracking. I'm leaving Preston. Tom's breath hitched. Are you sure? How can I stay married to someone who manipulated me into betraying my own father? She whispered. Someone who planned my life like a project. Tom brushed her hair from her face. Then we'll get you through this. Safely. Carefully. She nodded, wiping her tears. I want to remember who I was before them, she whispered. Before the money, before the training, before the control. We'll find her again, Tom said softly. Together. She stayed the night, curled up on his couch, the same couch she had once tried to avoid. Tom watched over her like he had when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. Except now, the storm wasn't in the sky. It was in the life she was leaving behind. By morning, something in her looked different. Raw, brighter, determined. Dad, she said as she sat down at the kitchen table. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you for not giving them your money. Tom smiled sadly. Thank you, she whispered, voice steadying, for being my father even when I forgot how to be your daughter. And in that moment, Tom realized something undeniable. This wasn't the collapse of Sarah's life. It was the beginning of her rebirth. Morning sunlight crept across the apartment like a hesitant guest, illuminating the quiet space where father and daughter sat together, two people stitched back into each other's life by truth and ruin. Sarah looked fragile but resolute, as if something inside her had finally stopped breaking and started rebuilding. Dad, she said softly, her fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. I'm going to end it today. Tom breathed in slowly. You don't have to rush. I do, she whispered. The longer I stay there, the harder it'll be. And after seeing those emails, I can't breathe in that house anymore. She paused, pressing her palm to her chest, almost surprised by the tremor beneath her ribs. I trusted them over you. I let them rewrite my reality. And now I see exactly what they wanted. Tom reached across the table. You were targeted, sweetheart, not loved, targeted. And it takes incredible strength to see that, let alone walk away. Her eyes softened, though the bruise of betrayal still lingered in them. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of leaving Preston. I'm scared of what they'll do when they realize they can't control me. Tom nodded, because he understood exactly what the Whitmans were capable of. Power used like a blade, charm wielded like honey poison. We'll do this, smart, he said. Not alone. Call Elizabeth. She'll guide you. Sarah dialed the attorney with trembling hands. Elizabeth listened, calm and measured, as Sarah described everything. The manipulation, the threats, the psychological conditioning. When she finished, Elizabeth didn't hesitate. Sarah, she said firmly through the phone, you need to leave that home today. Quietly, strategically, take only what's yours. And do not confront your husband alone. A plan unfolded. Clear, sharp, protective. By noon, Sarah stood at Tom's door with a suitcase packed in trembling urgency. Clothes, essential documents, her laptop, her phone. Nothing from the Whitmans. Nothing tainted. Are you sure you're ready? Tom asked. She nodded, though her breath hitched. I have to be. They drove to the Whitman estate together, but Sarah insisted on entering alone first. It has to be me, she said. They have to hear it from me. Tom agreed, though every instinct in him screamed to shield her from that house entirely. She walked through the carved wooden doors with a straight back, the woman she had once been beginning to take shape beneath the fractures. Tom waited in the driveway, watching the windows with a patience carved out of fear. Inside, Sarah found Preston in the living room, sipping espresso like a man without consequences. He smiled when he saw her, a rehearsed gesture that didn't reach his eyes. There you are. Your father finally let you come home. She didn't sit. I'm leaving you. The word struck harder than any physical blow. Preston froze, then laughed, a low, disbelieving sound. Don't be ridiculous. I'm serious, she said, voice steady. I'm done letting your family control my life. I saw the emails, the phases, the plans, everything. He paled, just slightly, enough to betray the truth he couldn't bury. I don't know what you think you saw. You used me, she whispered. You used me to get to my father. You used me to get to his money. You used me to build your own stepping stone. His expression hardened, dropping the charming facade. You're being dramatic. You've always been emotional. It's why you need guidance. No, she said, shaking her head. It's why you chose me. His jaw clenched. She took a step back toward the door. I'm leaving. Don't contact me. My attorney will handle everything. Preston's composure cracked. Sarah, listen to me. If you walk out that door, you're throwing away the best life you'll ever have. She looked at him with a softness that wasn't weakness. It was mourning. The best life is the one where I'm not afraid to exist. She turned, walked, didn't look back. Not even when she heard his voice twist into a vicious, snarling threat. You'll regret this. She didn't. Not for 1 second. When she stepped outside, Tom was waiting beside the car. She collapsed into him, not sobbing this time, just exhausted, as if she carried a mountain on her shoulders and finally set it down. It's done, she whispered. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you. But the day wasn't over, not with the storm brewing behind them. As they reached the car, Charles Whitman himself emerged from the mansion. His stride was measured, deliberate, like a man who believed the world should part for him. Sarah, he called, his voice calm in a way that felt predatory. A word. She turned but didn't step toward him. Tom subtly moved closer, positioning himself just slightly in front of her. Charles smiled thinly. I understand emotions are high. Decisions made under distress rarely stand. Why don't you come inside and we discuss this reasonably? No, Sarah said. I'm leaving. Leaving? Charles repeated, mocking the word as if it were childish. You have responsibilities to this family. Tom stepped in. Not anymore. Charles' gaze slid to him, sharp and cold. Ah, the puppet master himself. Tom didn't blink. You manipulated her for 2 years. Charles' smile vanished. You're making a mistake. Thomas, you think you won something today? You've only created chaos. Sarah leaving doesn't hurt us. It hurts her. She's walking away from a life of privilege, protection, opportunity. She's walking toward her freedom, Tom said softly. Charles' eyes darkened, a flicker of rage he wasn't accustomed to revealing. She will come crawling back, he hissed. They all do. Sarah's voice was steady. No, Charles, I won't. He turned to her with an icy smile that didn't reach his eyes. Without us, he said, you are nothing. Sarah recoiled as if struck. Tom's voice cut the air. She's everything they never understood, and everything you'll never control again. Charles stepped back, not defeated, but thrown off balance, the way predators are when prey refuses to run. This isn't over, he said. No, Tom replied. It's not, but the part where you get to write her future is. They got in the car. Sarah exhaled shakily as the gates closed behind them. Slow, heavy, like a kingdom losing a prison it thought it owned. Back at Tom's apartment, she sat down on the couch and let the quiet settle. Dad, she said, staring forward, voice trembling with release. Today was the first time in years I felt like myself. Tom placed a hand on her shoulder. That's your mother in you, he whispered. She never bowed to anyone. Sarah closed her eyes and let the truth wash over her. You know what scares me? She asked. What? They are not going to let this go. Tom nodded. I know. And you're not scared, she whispered. He looked at her with the steadiness of a man who had already faced life's darkest losses and survived. No, he said softly, because for the first time, we are fighting them together. Outside, the world went on as usual, cars passing, voices drifting up from the street. But inside that tiny apartment, a new reality took root. The Whitmans weren't gods. They weren't fate. They weren't destiny. They were just people who believed money made them untouchable. And now, they had touched the wrong family. The reckoning wasn't over. It had only just begun.